Good evening, good evening. What date is it today? The 25th of February. Back on a Tuesday night for my Principles of Good Health series. And tonight I'm talking about 7 reasons to love your gut. So I'm hoping there'll be some people who can join me live tonight, but if not, I will always save this onto my Facebook page so you can catch up with this later on. I've just realised it is Shrove Tuesday, so I'm sure some of you with children, you could be busy right now doing pancakes, and why not on Shrove Tuesday? But just to say, I'm back on Tuesday night. Tuesday night is the slot I'm going to try and stick to as much as I can at 6 o'clock. I'm not going to be doing this next week because next week is my Facebook challenge week. I'm hoping lots of you are going to join. There's still time to join it, but I won't be doing this next week because I'm going to be putting my attention and focus into supporting those who are doing my challenge in my closed Facebook group, the 30-in-5 challenge that starts on Monday, Monday the 2nd of March. So I'll be back doing this on Tuesday the 11th of March at 6 o'clock. So I hope you can join me for the next one in my series on that date. So I'm talking tonight about 7 reasons to love your gut. As you know, it's what I talk a lot about, but I thought I would just emphasize why I take this so seriously, and links back to why I'm doing the challenge of eating 30 different foods that support gut health next week, the 30-in-5 day challenge that I'm doing next week. This is really the tip of the iceberg. There are many other things that I could talk about, but I've just highlighted 7 different health reasons, 7 health reasons why we need to love our gut and why it's so important that we take care of it. Hi there, I don't know who's joined. It's pleased to see you. Do say hello. Put a little thumbs up or something in the comments box, or if you've got any comments, please add them. It's nice to see you here. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about some reasons for our health reasons to love our gut. So the first one I'm going to mention is metabolic disease. So metabolic syndrome is a whole cluster of different conditions that are linked to high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, raised cholesterol levels. So there's lots and lots of things. There can be a cluster of symptoms clustered together that's put under this banner of metabolic syndrome. So metabolic disease, lots of different things that can be going on in the body. And of course, diet isn't helping with all of these, but there's more and more research to show how different an imbalance in the different strains of bacteria that are going on there. There can be a lack of or too much of certain types of bacteria that are now linked to obesity. They've done experiments with germ-free mice, whether we like it or not, and what they do. I do appreciate that, but where they have effectively, hi Rihanna, nice to see you join tonight, where they've effectively removed all the bacteria from the mice, and then they fed it the same diet as other mice and watched the mice become really obese. So they can be lacking certain strains of bacteria, and of course there are other reasons for that in what we're eating. But why is it that some people really struggle to lose weight no matter what they do? And so there is a link there with the certain types of bacteria that you could be missing, that has shown its link to potentially an increased risk of diabetes. Say hi. I can see there's more people joining now, so do say hello, and if you've got any comments, please add them. So I'm talking about the first reason about health reasons to support our gut health is metabolic syndrome, and I've just mentioned about lacking strains of certain types of bacteria and links to obesity. Also links to type 2 diabetes. There can be difficulty there with maintaining insulin regulation, and again insulin sensitivity. I don't know if you've heard of it. Insulin resistance, where the cells are struggling to either recognize insulin, which takes glucose into the cells, struggling with that in the body, and linked again back to the gut and the bacteria in the guts that is having an impact not necessarily the sole cause, but having an impact on the body's ability to utilize glucose via the messages coming from insulin, cells not being sensitive to insulin, and being resistant to it. And that again in turn can lead on to type 2 diabetes, is when we've got too much glucose circulating in the bloodstream and the body's inability to remove it. Back to that as well is cholesterol synthesis. So within the gut, it has a key part to play, because excess cholesterol is excreted out of the body in something called bile. And a lot of that can be excreted out of the body. So if there's some impairment in the gut, it can mean that too much cholesterol can be reabsorbed back in the bloodstream, and that could lead to heightened levels of cholesterol. So cholesterol synthesis can be impaired. And if we've got the wrong types of bacteria, there's links there also with regards to the levels of the LDL and the HDL cholesterol. So you may have heard of LDL cholesterol being called the bad cholesterol, and we've got HDL cholesterol, which is known as the good cholesterol. It's quite complex, but that's very simplistic. But if we've got the right levels of LDL cholesterol, it's saying I might have connection problem. I hope it's okay and you can hear me. If you can hear me okay, could you give me a thumbs up or let me know? I'm hoping it's still okay. The message is gone now, so my broadband link should be okay. So, do let me know. So that's the first area. I've got into quite a bit, but this metabolic syndrome linked to different health conditions, cardiovascular disease, higher cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, can all come back to looking at the gut first and foremost. The second big area we really need to focus on is with the brain, the mood, brain health, different mood conditions, links now to things like autism, Alzheimer's, depression, lots and lots of links now that are going on. I'm hoping that thumbs up means you can hear me okay, so that's good. Lots and lots of research here about the gut-brain link. So we do know there is a direct nervous system link between the gut and the brain. They are talking, they're in contact with each other. This feeling of butterflies in your stomach when you get nervous, we used to talk about that a lot, didn't we? I've got butterflies in my stomach. It's when we're feeling a bit anxious and unsure about something, and this feeling of butterflies in our stomach. Or if we're stressed and uptight, we can't eat, we don't feel like eating. And equally, that message is coming from the brain to the gut, but we now know there's a direct link linking the gut back to the brain. They're influencing one another all the time. So we know there are mechanisms going on, mood modifying mechanisms. So if excess toxins get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, which can happen through constipation, for example, toxins can get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. Or you may have heard a concept of something called leaky gut. If the walls of the intestines get slightly leaky, there can be bigger gaps, and toxins can get easily reabsorbed. And those toxins can also come, thanks Rhiannon, you can hear me okay, thank you. Some toxins can also get reabsorbed back from the wrong types of bacteria. They can give out toxins and they can get absorbed into the bloodstream. And there's some research again to show that these toxins can act on our central nervous system and can modify mechanisms. And this has been shown to link to some depression. We can have an influence also between the gut and the brain on neurotransmitters. So you've probably heard of serotonin. That's very much linked to this feeling of low mood and depression. But we've got other neurotransmitters like dopamine and GABA and adrenaline. These all act as neurotransmitters, and they can all be influenced and impaired by what is going on in the gut and the bacteria there as well. So it's really, really important, a huge amount of research in this area. And the wrong types of bacteria can cause some sort of low-grade inflammation, and low-grade inflammation has been shown to have some sort of cognitive impairment. So it may affect our ability to think straight, it may affect our focus and concentration. So just in simple ways, it doesn't necessarily need to be a more serious health concern or health condition, but in just very simple ways and subtle ways, there can be this impairment to our ability to think straight at times. So immunity, I talked about immunity 2 weeks ago and linking immunity to gut health. So we do know that 70% of our immunity starts in our gut, for various reasons that I talked about a few weeks ago on my one of my Tuesday night talks. I talked about this. But just in more serious areas, the bacteria, not just the bacteria in the gut, but the what am I trying to say? The white blood cell production that produces immune regulating cells. So we've got cells that are trying to send off an immune response, and then we've got other regulatory cells that are trying to dampen down that immune response. And this can all go haywire. That's what happens when we get autoimmune conditions. Now, some of the stool testing that I do actually identifies a cluster of different bacteria that research has shown that can link to certain types of autoimmune conditions. One that comes to mind is something that's linked to rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition. When the body starts attacking its own tissues when it's an autoimmune conditions, and there's lots of different types of autoimmune conditions, but we do know now that there are certain types of bacteria that are somehow sending out and encouraging a message to go out in the body, telling it to attack certain types of tissues. It's a fairly new area, and a lot more research obviously needs to take place there with regards to, what type of bacteria and just exactly how are they working to have this influence on things like autoimmune conditions. But it's a really interesting area. Skin conditions, so things like eczema and itchy skin, psoriasis, other conditions like that. Rosacea can all start from within the gut as well. The stool testing that I use, I've just been going over some results with a client, and I actually did my own. It's a new test that I'm using now, and I did this myself a few weeks ago. And it actually came up one of the bacterial strains, and I was talking to the clinician team, and they asked me if I had any sort of dermatitis, and I just happened to mention that I was getting quite itchy skin behind my ears, that was quite new, just sort of a bit itchy. And they actually demonstrated that one of the strains of bacteria that was in slightly higher numbers in my stool count was linked to dermatitis. There's that level of detail that you can get now from this information. So skin conditions. Another reason for skin conditions is I talked about this leaky gut and toxins getting back through from the gut, and toxins getting back into the bloodstream rather than being eliminated out of the body. Now, the skin is an eliminatory organ, and so if we're not able to efficiently take toxins out of the body through the bowel, then there can be an enhanced uptake of toxins back into the bloodstream. Again, particularly if you've got something like leaky gut, more toxins can get through. And the skin may be used as that eliminatory organ. And we're all unique individuals. So just because some people may get a certain condition that may just show up on one hand, or like for me, behind my ears, it could be somewhere else on the body, it could be on your legs. It could just be nothing more than your body's attempt to try and throw off toxins through the skin, because the skin is actually this massive eliminatory organ, and it might just be using the most direct means of trying to get rid of the toxins in that way. So that's something to think about there. So I've done metabolic diseases. I've looked at brain health and mood. I've looked at immune conditions and autoimmune conditions and skin conditions. So I've done 4 main things so far. The 5th one I would just like to mention is inflammation. We can get enhanced inflammation that starts in the gut. Again, stool testing gives me a measure, something called calprotectin, and that actually shows inflammation in the gut, down the intestinal lining. But we can get enhanced inflammation that's going on in the body as well, which we need to try and dampen down. So that's 5. Now, number 6, food intolerances. I get lots of people call me and ask me if they can do food intolerance testing. And I always say to people and ask them why they want to do the test. It's a blood test, it can be quite expensive, it's a finger prick test, and it shows up antibodies to certain types of foods. There is a school of thought that it's not reliable and it's not accurate, but there are a large number of tests out there, and there's other research to say it is very accurate and useful. And I do very occasionally do this with clients, but I always question clients why they want to do it, and often it's to do with not just gut symptoms, but what I call systemic symptoms, i.e. they're things that are through the bloodstream and can show up in the body anywhere. For example, skin conditions, it could be things like headaches. Some people may complain of a foggy brain. And sometimes these things are linked to a potential intolerance to food. So I always ask clients about why they want to do something like a food intolerance test. And I go back to the basics of explaining that sometimes the body's inability to effectively break down a food into its simplistic components, it may mean that a partially digested food finds its way into the bloodstream, and that's what throws off a reaction in the body that can be seen as this intolerance. And I go back to basics with clients saying, well, first of all, we need to think about whether the body's able to break down that food. Is the digestion impaired in any way? Because if digestion is impaired, stopping the breakdown of the food, there's more likelihood that you may get something like a partially broken down food finding its way into the bloodstream and causing some sort of reaction. And usually by starting to support digestive ability, and of course I've talked about the importance of chewing food well and doing that sort of thing before, it can very often get rid of an intolerance. So always think about supporting digestion, chewing food well, but paying close attention actually to that sort of thing, rather than just saying, oh, I've got an intolerance to something, because normally it's not as straightforward as that, and it's just down to poor ability to digest the food well. So that was the 6th thing I wanted to mention. And the final thing was actually linked to the gut itself, and more serious conditions like intestinal bowel diseases, rather than IBS, irritable bowel syndrome symptoms. Here I'm talking about more serious things like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, serious conditions that can really affect someone's ability to enjoy life, for their nutritional status and their health. And looking at to why those may be happening, they are considered autoimmune conditions as well, but we do need to go back more closely and look at what's going on with the strains of the gut bacteria and what can be going on there. So there's 7 reasons there, so many more things I could potentially talk about, but we are learning more and more and more about the reasons why health absolutely does start in the gut and how we need to give a really close focus to this. As I said, I do a lot of stool testing with clients. It can show up a lot of what's going on. But before we do that, it comes back to taking care of our gut and supporting and feeding the gut in the right way. So of course, next week I am doing my 5-day challenge, my 30 in 5 with plant foods. I've been giving it a lot of thought. I have produced my list here of my foods. This is what I'm going to be sending out to everybody, so that you've got a tick list here of the sorts of foods to be aiming for. There'll be recipes that I'm going to be posting on the closed Facebook group, and I'm probably going to put them up there on Friday. They're not recipes that you must follow, but there's going to be some really helpful recipes that if you were to use those, you will definitely get to your 30 in 5 without too much difficulty, and they're not difficult to use. And I've been plotting other things I'm going to talk about each day, other ways that you could do some simple fermentation of food, other recipes that you can have, some other things that we can challenge ourselves on. So I'll be going live every day to talk about what we're doing each day and supporting you through the 5 days. I think there's been a problem with the link, and my somebody who helps me with this is looking into it, because one of the links seems to be broken, and I've got people that appear to have signed up for it that are sitting in my email list, but for some reason I think the link that they then click on to get into the closed Facebook group somehow is not working. So I am definitely going to be rectifying that in the next couple of days, or hopefully by tomorrow. I know there's been a problem, and I also know that some of you have invited people directly into the closed Facebook group, but they absolutely have to go through that sign up process first of all by clicking the link that's in my Facebook page, my main Facebook page, clicking on that link, and then from the email hopefully getting that other link repaired so that you can sign up. I don't know what's happened, because half of you have managed to get into the Facebook page and some of you haven't. So please be patient with me while I get that sorted. I'm going to keep promoting it over the next couple of days, but by Friday I would definitely have foods, the food list going in there, other guidelines that I've got prepared, and recipes will start to go up as well by Friday. So I'm really looking forward to doing this with you next week. I won't be doing my Facebook Live like this, my Principles of Good Health series, next Tuesday, because I'm focusing on my closed Facebook group next week. But there'll be more news to follow. I'm going to be doing another challenge post Easter. So there will be more news to follow at the end of next week, which I'll be sharing with my closed Facebook group next week. And then I'll be really promoting that after that. So there'll be more news about another challenge that will be taking place after Easter, which I'm really looking forward to doing. So thank you again for your time. Any comments and any thoughts about what you want me to cover in the coming weeks, please let me know. But I'll be back here on Tuesday, the 6th of March. No, I'll be back here at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 11th of March, with my next Facebook Live. Thank you. Have a good evening.